a new podcast with me, your host Girish. In today's podcast, we're going to actually explore something very important, something fundamental for your life, perhaps the most important question you could ever ask yourself. And this question is, what's the whole purpose of life? And to answer this big question, because it's a very huge one, and each of us has his or her own opinion about it. So to actually answer this question in a rational, in a logical way, we're going to explore the three different viewpoints from three different philosophers. We're going to look at what Freud had to say about it. We're going to look at what Adler had to say about it. And we're also going to look at what Frankl had to say about it. All right? So, before jumping into this big discussion about what the whole purpose of life is, we need to first look at the basic human conditioning. So the basic human conditioning is that we are born, we grow up, we age, we fall sick, and we die. Okay? So this is a cycle which each of us needs to actually go through. We can't escape that. So if you want to live a happy life, you want to live an enlightened life, you actually need to accept the basic human conditioning, which consists of suffering, all right? Which is basically about suffering, but also accepting that we have to suffer in life gives a certain sort of freedom to it also. We just don't need to concentrate on the suffering, but we actually can't run away from it as well. And that was actually the first noble truth as per Buddhism. But in today's session, we're actually going to discuss about the purpose of life. So once we've accepted the basic human conditioning, we need to think about what actually motivates us to reach our highest potential. What motivates us to live a life which we would want to experience every single day? What motivates us to live a life in such a way that there's total expression of ourselves, and when we actually go home and sleep, we sleep peacefully knowing that we've lived a life we really wanted to live. So what are these things which motivate us? As per Freud, what motivates human beings to take actions is actually pleasure. So people are motivated to take actions which make them feel good. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because the basic condition of human beings is we experience reality through our senses, right? So our senses kind of guide us. And this is why we actually hold hands. This is why we hug each other. This is why we need a certain relationship with people, a certain closeness to people, because biologically we feel good when we interact with people in this way, when we are close to people. And this is how human beings work. We operate based on our senses, and this kind of supports Freud's thesis that pleasure is the thing which motivates people to take actions. And this is one of the reasons also that why you wouldn't kick your foot on the wall, because it's going to give you pain, and you don't want pain. You want things which make you feel good. So all our actions are actually guided by the senses, guided by the knowing that, okay, if I do this thing, I'm going to feel good, and this is why I take this action. So that was Freud's perspective about what motivates people. The second perspective by Adler is power. So Adler says that people are driven by power. This is why people chase job titles at work. This is why people chase money. This is why people chase fame. It's because we are driven by power. When we have power, we have that sense of being important. We feel significant as human beings, and in that way it gives a certain purpose to our life. So that was the second perspective by Adler. All right, and if you look at just these two aspects, you start to understand why society behaves the way it behaves, why people wear certain kind of clothing, why they drive certain kind of cars. It's all about communication. It's all about showing that sense of power or importance to others, right? And the third aspect, which was brought forward by Frankl, is different to the first two ones. What Frankl said that what motivates people is actually meaning, the sort of meaning they give to their lives. And to understand where Frankl is coming from, we actually need to look at his history. And we need to understand that actually Frankl was in the concentration camp during the World War II. And he came up with that philosophy based on what he observed during that dark period of history. What he observed that it was not people who were physically the strongest. It was not people who were physically the strongest who survived longest at the concentration camps. It was not the case. What he actually observed that people who were actually kind to each other, who were actually selfless, who actually gave their last piece of bread to those who were sick and little children, those people who actually behaved like that, these were the ones who actually survived the longest at the concentration camps. And that changed his whole perspective about life. And that made him realize that those who are able to retain a sense of control over the environment, these are the people who actually survive the longest. Okay, and the whole philosophy comes up very nicely as follows. What we need to understand from what Frankl said is, in this dark period of history, he also realized that everything can be taken away from a man, from a person. But one thing you can't take away is the person's attitude. So this is what he realized. And he claimed that if we can choose our own attitude, given the set of circumstances, we can choose our own way. So we can't control the circumstances we have to face sometimes, but what we can control is we can control our attitude. And this is what Frankl encourages to do in our life. If we have a meaning which is bigger than our little self, we're actually going to be very motivated to live our life. We're going to feel very happy and very satisfied. So Frankl helped us further by actually coming up with certain guidelines, which I'm going to lay out to you. The first one he gave to us is, he said that if we can experience reality by interacting in an authentic way with the environment and with others, we're going to find meaning in our life. So that means interacting with people by dropping labels, by dropping out your belief system, by dropping everything. It's really connecting to people and looking in each other's eyes. The second thing he said that we need to give something back to the world through creativity and through self-expression. We need to give something back to the world and not think about our little self. The third one is we need to change our attitude when faced with a situation or circumstance we cannot change. So it's not what we expect from life. It's not what we expect from life, because life changes. We don't always control life. We don't always control what happens to us. We can't do that. So why lose time? Why lose energy trying to think about what we can't control? Instead, what we can do is we can ask ourselves what life expects from us. So when something happens to us, we change our attitude. We change our psyche so that we can adapt, so that we can fit the current situation, so that we can survive. So ultimately, my friends, it's your attitude towards life which matters, not what happens to you. So I hope that you found this podcast very interesting. It was a lot of fun for me to record it for you. See you very soon. Lots of love, Girish.